All right, everyone. So I'll guess I'll get us started. So hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for today's town hall with Salud Carbajal. We do have Spanish interpretation for today um, by Lorena Pike. So let me share screens on how you can access that. Here we go. So if you see here, at the bottom of your Zoom application, there's 3 dots, or sometimes it'll be a globe that says Spanish interpretation. So if you click on that and select on language interpretation, it'll give you options to click on channels. So if you're listening in English, be sure to click on that. Don't be on the original audio, just either select English or Spanish audio. And then make sure to mute the original audio. A huge thank you to Lorena Pike for providing interpretations. And then in Spanish, para los que necesitan interpretación en español, oprimen el botón que tiene tres círculos que dice más. Tal vez puede ser un símbolo que es como un globo que va a decir interpretación de idiomas. Selecciona eso y te va a dar selecciones para unos idiomas. Por favor de presionar el canal en español o inglés si lo necesitan en inglés. Y también apachura el botón para silenciar el audio original. Yes. So with that said, and just to make sure that people aren't talking over one another, we'll be asking our speakers this evening to make sure that you are on mute at all times, unless it's your time to go, just so that we're not talking over one another. This also aids the interpreters. We will also have time at the end for Q&A, so be sure to write your questions down using the chat room. So to introduce myself, my name is David Melendres, and I am part of the steering committee for Truth and Recruitment. We'd like to thank Salud Carbajal for his time and being here to listen to concerns about the expansion of selective services to women, and hope that it can provide him with more things to think about as he is present at the upcoming hearings for the bill. To talk a little bit more about Truth and Recruitment, Truth and Recruitment is a project of the Santa Barbara Friends Quaker Meeting, a 501c3 nonprofit. Our goal is to educate students, families, and school districts about alternatives to military careers, inform families of their children's privacy rights, and advocate for policies regulating recruiter presence on campuses. We'll start today with the 30 minutes of seconds of moment of silence in recognition of the soldiers killed at Fort Hood, the Texas Army base. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you all. And again, we'll start us today off with Kate Connell, the Director of Truth and Recruitment. She'll go over a bit about the background on Selective Service System. And right after, we will have our panelists speak about their concerns about the expansion of the selective services. Next, Salud Carbajal will have some time to speak once they are done. And lastly, we will have some time for Q&A for both our panelists and Salud Carbajal. So to start us off, Kate Connell, if you can take the mic, the Director for Truth and Recruitment. Yeah, so again, just a huge thank you to everyone who's joining us today as we're waiting for Salud Carbajal to get on. We thought it would be best to have some time for, have Salud Carbajal listen to some concerns about what it would mean to have the women join the selective service system. So we hope that this would help, provide some more insight, more things to think about for our congressman who's representing. who's representing this, I should say. And it's a part of the democratic process. So we really want to thank him and his office for allowing us to have a moment of his time to voice that concern.
And I did want to say, Edward Hasbrook, who's one of our attendees, he's going to put in a link for a frequently asked questions about the selective service that's on his website. And that's just a really nice resource. We also have a link on Truth in Recruitment's website as well, but you can go direct there. And it exists in both English and Spanish. And I thank, again, Lorena, who's on our call, that she did the translation of those frequently asked questions back when we had our summit on youth in the military last October. So yeah, I welcome everybody here. And I really appreciate people taking the time. I know it's kind of a crazy time right now, but as David said, we're very appreciative that Representative Carbajal agreed to come here, even though he has differing views on mandatory registration for young people. He definitely wants to hear what we have to say, and
make sure to write down your Q&A questions in the Q&A or put them in the chat. We'll be observing both. And yeah, is Salud Carbajal with us today? Thank you so much for joining us, Congressman. So just to talk about thank you.
Hello.
So just to talk about how today will go, today Kate Connell, the Director of Truth and Recruitment, will go over a bit about a background on the Selective Service Systems. Right after, we will have our panelists speak about their concerns about expanding the Selective Service System. And then next, Salud Carbajal, we will have some time for you to speak. And then lastly, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end for both our panelists and Salud Carbajal. So to pass the mic over, I'll hand it off to Kate Connell, the Director of Truth and Recruitment. You're muted, by the way.
I'm back. Thank you. Thank you, David, and thank you, Salud, for working hard to get onto this call. And thank you to all the members of the community and panelists for your attendance today. So I'm going to go present some historical background on the Selective Service, and then talk about the potential impact of expanding mandatory registration to women. Since the reinstatement of Selective Service registration in 1980 by Congress and President Carter, only men between age 18 and 26 years old have been required to register for military conscription or the draft. I was draft age when it was reinstated, and as a college freshman, in solidarity with my male peers, leafleted outside the Santa Cruz post office against it. Now, I am the parent of 2 draft age youth and face the dilemma of them potentially being subjected to a military draft. In April last year, I traveled to Washington, D.C. with 2 teenagers, not my kids this time, to testify before the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. We told the commissioners that mandatory registration for the military draft is ageist in that it only targets youth, and undemocratic and immoral since it takes away the choice to follow one's conscience. The former director of the Selective Service, Bernard Rosker, who set up the current system in 1980, came out of retirement to testify before the commission. He said, "There is no need to continue to register people for a draft that will not come. No need to fight the battle over registering women, and no military need to retain the Military Selective Service Act." On March 25th this year, despite our testimony and that of experts such as Dr. Rosker, this same commission recommended that Congress expand mandatory draft registration to women. We believe that instead of trying to expand draft registration to young women as well as young men, Congress should end mandatory draft registration for everyone. We have heard, it's just registration, it's not the draft. But stopping registration matters. The Commission said that the reason for continuing draft registration is so that the US is able to fight larger, longer wars that will require more people. It is disingenuous to say registration is not a big deal, but then say it would be a devastating blow to national security to eliminate the Selective Service. The only point to continuing the Selective Service is that the US government may want to impose a draft. Now, there are some great provisions in HR 6412, which is the bill Representative Carbajal is co-sponsoring, that propose more support of voluntary service opportunities such as AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, and Senior Corps. But buried under these provisions is the expansion of mandatory draft registration to women. There are serious lifelong consequences for failing to comply with registration. Currently, men who do not register can be fined up to $250,000 and serve up to 5 years in prison. They also become ineligible to receive college financial aid, federal job training, or federal employment in executive positions. And these punishments can have particularly life-altering effects on undocumented youth, both documented and undocumented immigrants, in fact, as failing to register can disqualify them from the path to US citizenship. The Commission report states that women register and perhaps be called up in the event of a draft is a necessary prerequisite for their achieving equality as citizens, as it has been for some other groups historically discriminated against in American history. We could not disagree more. The implication is that women will attain gender equality by being forced to register for the draft and participate in militarism, as the Commission members believe was the case for other groups historically discriminated against, likely referring to discrimination by white people of color. People of color serve in the US military in disproportionate numbers and have served in every war since the nation's founding. While the military was a pioneer in racial integration, participation in the military has not led to greater equality for people of color. So even under the most superficial scrutiny, the equality argument simply falls apart. Extending coercive measures to women will not expand their opportunities. It will merely remove their option to choose. So in conclusion, we have to ask, is Congress prepared that people are going to resist? People will refuse to register, and we will support their resistance. Does Representative Carbajal believe in fighting very large, unpopular wars potentially started under the Trump administration? This is what the situation would be if the country saw a need for a draft. Simply put, Congress needs to make a choice to abolish the draft and reallocate the human and financial resources to voluntary service opportunities for Americans of all ages, or extend draft registration to women, an action that will not bolster democracy or national security. There is a solution that we believe will fix this problem. Abolish draft registration for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Next up, another one of our panelists, Anthony Laverty, who is an Air Force veteran and is also a board member for House of Pride and Equality.
Hello, I'm Anthony Laverty. I was in the Air Force for 13 and a half years, and I did, register with Selective Service when I was at the legal age to do so, and I didn't give it much thought. I joined the military when I was 21, when I felt like that was something I wanted to do. I am a supporter of the all-volunteer force. However, I believe that the Selective Service goes against the principle of individual choice, and it's of selfless service. And really, it just forces someone into a military conflict that doesn't want to be there to begin with. I've had an uncle that was drafted during Vietnam, and when he returned, he had a very hard time adjusting back to society, and he's lived a very troubled life. I think the volunteer system, I believe, is the best system. When we have incentives to encourage people to join, a whole list of recruitment tools and I don't think there is really a need for selective service. We really haven't used it since Vietnam, and I don't believe we intend to use it. In the event that we were to face a war that required a draft, I believe America needs to be prepared to recruit more effectively, not force individuals to participate in a war that do not wish to do so. And I believe if Congress determines that selective service needs to remain, I think there's options that we can encourage to make it at least voluntary, to remove all the penalties. We can easily build a large database of people wanting to sign up and not violate the rights of individual choice, liberties, and freedoms. True voluntary service, I believe, is the best service. And I personally would not want to serve alongside someone that doesn't want to be there. And I wouldn't really want to defend a country that's willing to force children into war. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that all right? For our next panelist, as Osiel kind of gets situated, try to get that technical difficulty fixed. Our next panelist is Lane Clark, who's a member of the Santa Barbara Friends Meetings as board president, clergy, and lady.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm a member of my name is Lane Clark, member of the Santa Barbara Friends Meeting and also president of the board of CLU Santa Barbara. I'm also an artist and a documentary filmmaker and an educator. And first off, I want to thank you, Representative Carbajal, for your leadership and for always being open to listen to the people you represent and to carry our concerns forward. So thank you for getting this whole thing going tonight. I've been a conscientious objector since 1974 when I had to register with the Selective Service. At that time, I was living in Philadelphia, and I found my way to a Quaker meeting who helped me to clarify what my spiritual convictions were. They also helped me to articulate my deeply held Christian belief that killing is against divine law and that people of faith are called to work for peace. I believe that our society needs to get past the idea that militarism and armaments are a civilized way to settle conflicts. A readily expandable military and ever-expanding arsenal of weapons of mass destruction are just a wrong priority. They make us less safe and they're a drain on the economy. These, to me, are matters of conscience that spring from my Quaker faith. And for a conscientious objector, registering for the draft also amounts to participation in build-up to wars. So I see this as a matter of religious freedom. The other thing that troubles me about HR 6412 is this punitive aspect that requires non-citizen immigrants and children of immigrants to register with the Selective Service at age 18 and deals out harsh punishment if they fail to do so. Punishments like prison, denial of scholarships, or denial of a path to citizenship. And then finally, on the question of mandatory registration for young women, this is not an issue of equality. Women already have the right to choose a military career voluntarily if that's what they want. There's growing evidence of pervasive abuse of women in the military. And I feel that forcing young women to register with the Selective Service is a form of cruelty. It exposes many young women to the unnecessary stress and trauma of the possibility hanging over their heads that any moment now they may have to go into this place where they're not safe. It signals to them that society will not protect them, and it values militarism more than it values their safety and well-being. So for these reasons, I would advocate for the abolition of mandatory registration with the Selective Service altogether. Thank you for hearing my view.
Thank you, Lane. Thank you very much, Osiel. Take a couple seconds, see if the interpreter can catch up. All right. Now for our next panelist. So next we have Ashante Smith, who's a student at Ernest Rigetti High School here in Santa Maria. She's also a facilitator for the Fun for Santa Barbara's Youth Making Change program. So yes, she'll be providing the asks for today. If you can go ahead, Ashante.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Okay, great. First of all, I would just like to say thank you, Carbajal, for being here and listening. At a 17-year-old, I mean, I'm kind of shocked that I'm doing this myself, but I would just like to say thank you for being here. So as I begin, hello, everyone. Like David said, my name is Ashante Smith, and I am a senior at Rigetti High School. I'm going to be turning 18 this November, which means if the mandatory draft is extended to women, I will be directly affected. This would be a big life-changing decision for anyone, but because I'd be forced to join without the option to register without consequences or fine, makes it much more difficult. Since I do not have a say or vote in whether women will be extended to the mandatory draft, as a representative of Truth in Recruitment, I do have a few asks for Representative Carbajal. Posting them. Okay. Ask for Representative Carbajal. First, full and fair hearings on the bill. Can he commit to pressuring Chairwoman Jackie Spear of Military Personnel Subcommittee to have an anti-draft witness at any hearings on whether to extend registration to women? We can provide and refer him to speakers. Second, will you also push for consideration of the bipartisan bill sponsored by Representative Peter DeFazio, H.R. 5492, which calls for the elimination of the Selective Service at any hearings regarding it? Third, will you work to have enforcement methods and costs, including lives and money, seriously discussed in the consideration of the bills? We are not advocating for prosecution and incarceration of non-registrants, but, sorry, I lost my thing. Is there nothing about enforcement in the bill ignores that legally non-registrants are liable up to 5 years in prison and a fine of $250,000? Would he consider removing the lifelong penalties and legal retribution imposed on non-registrants from the Selective Service? Lastly, has he considered modifying H.R. 64? It is a large bill with a recommendation to expand Selective Service System to women buried in amongst many provisions. We suggest that the provision to extend draft registration to women be for some reason I lost it. Kate, did you want to finish the last ask? It's like not popping up. Sorry, everyone.
No, it's okay. And we did send these to you, Salud, as well, so you will have them in writing. But let me just check here. Well, basically, with the bill that you're a co-sponsor of, it has a lot of provisions in it. And a big ask, and we've shared this with you before, was to retain the parts in the bill that give more resources to the voluntary programs, such as AmeriCorps and Senior Corps and Peace Corps, but to remove the provision and insert the text from Representative DeFazio's bill that calls for abolishing selective service, as well as preserving the ability for people to be conscientious objectors, and removing the lifelong penalties of people. And someone did, Edward, I think, did share in the chat links to those bills, and they are also on our website.
Great. Is that, are you done, Kate?
Yes, I'll turn it back over to David and you.
Yeah, so thank you all to the panelists. And now we have Salud Carbajal, which again, we really want to thank you for joining us today. This is the great part about civic engagement, where we can, talk with our representative. And it's awesome having someone like you who is willing and open enough to have these conversations. So thank you.
You're very welcome, David. To be able to provide you better and quicker answers, we did request that if we could get these in advance, and it's my understanding we just got them a few minutes ago. So just wanted to let you know that. But having said that, let me just start out by trying to address some of the issues that have been raised. First of all, I want to thank you, Kate and David, for organizing this. Like I said, sorry we just got the asks last minute, so we'll give them serious consideration. And Kate, let me just say that how sorry I am about your recent loss of your father. I know that was a recent development, so I'm very sorry. My condolences go out to you and your family. So sorry to hear that. I also would like to recognize the work that you guys are doing to promote discussion around these issues with high school students and others in our community. It's important to have these discussions, even if we disagree. And there are important issues that require a lot of thoughtful thinking. So thank you for the good discussions and that you have in the community. And thank you to not only you, Kate, but Anthony, Lane, Ociel, and Ashanti for your thoughtful questions and points that you've raised today. Ashanti, don't be nervous. It's great that you're involved. At your age, I'm not sure I had the confidence to be as articulate and eloquent as you. So job well done. As many of you know, my experience in the military has helped shape my life. But before I go into that, let me just share with you a little bit about my background. I'm the youngest of 7. My father was part of the Bracero guest worker program to this country in the 50s and the 60s. After the Bracero program, my father immigrated our family. I'm the youngest of 7. We first moved to Arizona, where he worked as an underground copper miner. When the mine closed, he moved us back to Oxnard, a place that he knew during his Bracero guest worker days. And we moved there because he thought he might be able to get a job there. And I grew up in Oxnard, and my mother couldn't work. She had rheumatoid arthritis and deformed hands, always in pain, always on cortisone and prednisone. If you know those medications, they're to deal with the inflammation and the pain that my mother was experiencing. My father was the only breadwinner of the family, so he worked on farms and out in the fields and minimum wage, no sick leave, no vacation, no medical leave. We were on Medi-Cal. As a matter of fact, after about a year in living in Oxnard, we moved into public housing, also known as the projects. And was lucky enough to have done well in school and came to UCSB. That's what brought me further up the Central Coast. While I was at UCSB, I met my wife. I have 2 wonderful kids. But it was at UCSB that I also joined the United States Marine Corps Reserve. And before that, also registered for the Selective Service. And so I know some of the thinking, some of the thoughts that go into a young person's mind about what that means. And obviously, you all have raised a lot of valid points. And in terms of my military experience, it really helped me in many ways. It helped me with additional resources for me to pay my way through school. It provided me healthcare at the time. It provided me the opportunity to use the VA home loan program, the California Veterans Program as well, to purchase my first home, my only home to date that I've been able to purchase. So if it wasn't for that, I'm not sure that I would be where I'm at today in terms of the quality of life that I've been able to afford to my family. Certainly it was instrumental for me. In Congress, as many of you know, I sit on the Armed Services Committee, and my military experience has been extremely helpful in my work to ensure that we make wise investments in our national security and to balance that with the equally important needs to invest for our domestic issues in our country. I have been a proponent of auditing our military expenditures to ensure that we are judicious and prudent in making sure that DOD is being judicious and prudent with the funds that are allocated to it. I also think that our committee has fair hearings, and it's one of the most bipartisan committees where we work together, both sides of the aisle more often than not. I believe we're better off as a military and as a country because we do have females in our services and now have afforded broader opportunities to all females, including combat billets. Today, we have more women and minorities serving in our military, and it's becoming even more diverse, including at the highest leadership ranks, although we need to do better. I firmly believe, as I said earlier, that women should have a seat at the table in every aspect of our government, including our military. Unfortunately, women have also faced sexual harassment and sexual assault at an alarming rate in our armed forces, whether it's in college, the military service academies, workplace. Sexual assault and harassment is never and should never be acceptable. I have personally supported policies to hold the Department of Defense accountable for deficiencies in its handling of sexual assault and harassment, including in our military service academies. During a recent hearing, I questioned Secretary Esper about the tragic murder of Vanessa Guillen and secured a commitment for an investigation, which is now ensuing in a very robust fashion. We must aim to recruit and retain the best and brightest for our military. We cannot do that if women who sign up to serve feel unsafe in their workplace. Our military relies on a voluntary force. Less than 1% of our population serves at any one time. The Selective Service ensures that we are ready in case of a national emergency, where our volunteer force cannot meet the required needs. And let me just say that we might have some differences of opinion. You know, I believe that we should never rush to war, any war, lightly. It should be the last resort. We should use our diplomatic channels and other economic channels to make sure that we avoid war. But sometimes that, unfortunately, is regrettably something we must consider. Human nature is such that throughout the history of the world, human beings have always fought for power, land, things that many of us at some point would say it shouldn't have lent itself to a war. But regrettably, human beings do that. We all wish we were in utopia where human beings were brighter, we would not resort to violence. Of course we do. We all adhere to that and wish that was the law of the land and nobody violated that. But unfortunately, that is not a place of reality in the world. And I believe a male-only selective service is antiquated, given how integral women have become at every level of our armed forces, including combat billets. I believe we need to ensure that we have a capable Department of Defense that is also accountable for the resources it is providing. I also strongly believe investing in our domestic priorities equally. That includes investments in our education system, housing, infrastructure, healthcare system, and all the realms which improve the lives of all residents in our country. Like I said earlier, we may not agree on all issues, but I'm committed to listening to all points of views. And with that, I'll turn it back to David.
Well, thank you so much, Salud Carbajal. Muchísimas gracias. Really appreciate you joining us. Yeah, so next part is we'll go to the Q&A for questions that were submitted to us and those who have been putting them on here.
David, can we look at the ones that were submitted
Yes.
earlier, just because I think we only have so much time. There may be some submitted today, but we're going to try and focus, I think, on just the mandatory draft registration. I know there's a lot of other concerns people have. Sorry,
All right,
David.
sounds good. So here we have one question. It says, why does Selective Service suddenly need names of young women? Adding women to a bigger Selective Service list would be a threatening move seen by foreign countries that speak against our countries intending to act peacefully.
Like I said earlier, if we're looking at gender equality and equity, I believe that affording the same opportunities to both women and men and treating both women and men is important when it comes to equal rights. Whether it's men or women, gathering that information is really for a national emergency. I hope we never have to reinstitute the draft. I hope we can limit and minimize the wars that we get engaged in, which we should really not take lightly in the future. But I think that that's why regrettably, I do believe a selective service of some form, the one that's in place, I do support it. Can we look at how we can make it even better or consider some of the concerns that are raised? Absolutely. But I think that it's important to be able to have a registry to mobilize people during a national crisis or emergency. Again, what I will tell you is what we hear often, and again, I don't take going to war lightly, and we should not rush to war. But freedom doesn't come for free. It just, you don't just wake up and life is great. Regrettably, you have to have a military force. We have a military force that's voluntary in our country. But should it ever take more than the voluntary force can address or meet? That's why we have the selective service. Just because I support having a selective service, I don't want you to misconstrue my commitment to peace and diplomacy. Just because I was in the service doesn't mean that I'm for war. We want to avoid war at all costs if we can. I believe strongly that we should have higher reasons why we should have to go to war at all than some of the reasons that have been used for some of the wars. We now have learned about the chemicals and mass destructions that never came to be in the Iraq war. We've learned that later. But that was one war, for example, that we can point to that the reasons at the end of the day did not come to be what was initially used as a way to take us into that war. So again, it's incumbent upon us to not rush to war.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Salud. One of our next questions we have here is, high school students can block their confidential information from military recruiters, but the Selective Service nullifies this right to privacy by amassing the data of every 18 to 26-year-old. Once registered, a confirmation notice is sent. And then for the one who asked this question, said that their son had a Marines recruitment card attached. In light of the vulnerability of these types of lists, how will the Selective Service protect registrants' confidential information from hackers? Oh, Kate, you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just as background here, because the military recruiters can get students' information, and we have, under the No Child Left Behind Act, which unfortunately made it so that schools have to give military recruiters student contact information. They have to give them the same access as college and job recruiters. It's a relatively recent law, so actually I think it's possible to maybe get rid of that because I don't think it makes sense. But you can opt out of having your students' information released to recruiters. And what happens though is once you turn 18, a student turns 18 and they're forced to register. And mostly I think it's because people register because they want to be able to apply for college financial aid and those kinds of things. I don't really think people think about the fact that they could also go to jail. But once they register, the Selective Service and the current director of the Selective Service, who was appointed by President Trump, he said that, oh, we use that for recruiting. They release it all to the Department of Defense. So it becomes this recruiting tool. You know, all through high school, you might have opted out from having the military contact you, but once you register, all of a sudden you're in this database. And so I think what the question is saying is that here's this database, which is probably unnecessary since the government has everybody's social security numbers and they have a huge database that they could call on if they really saw a need to impose the draft. But how are they going to protect it in this day and age of the digital world from people hacking in and getting into people's private confidential information?
I think that applies to everything. And I think it's a valid question of how secure is the information. It's no different than your social securities. It's no different than all the data that the government has about us. So it's valid to ask how secure the data is. And I could go back and ask that question as well, just to make sure, to find out what kind of answer we're provided. And I'll gladly make sure that I convey that to you all as well. But I think it's legitimate to ask, how secure is that information? Clearly, from a government standpoint, they want to be able to have it readily available. Sometimes it takes a while for databases to catch up where you actually live. And I think the Selective Service is asking to provide an update for the latest residence that you're at. And that's what they're, I think, hoping to achieve. But nothing is wrong with ensuring that the data is secure and not available to any other groups or anybody who's trying to break into the system.
All right. Thank you, Salud. Another one of our questions here, it says,
Hey,
what will
David,
it take? Oh,
this is Wendy. I
Go
just wanted to remind you all that Congressman Carbajal needs to be off promptly at 7 as he has something on his schedule.
Okay.
So I just wanted to remind you that.
yes.
So, okay.
Should we have time for one small question then? So here it says, what will it take and how much will it cost to identify, investigate, prosecute, and incarcerate people who resist wanting to, register for the Selective Services?
I think it's a valid question. Let me just share with you that only 20 individuals have been criminally charged with refusing to register for the draft since President Jimmy Carter reinstated it in 1980 in response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Only 14 were convicted. The last indictment was in 1986, and it was dismissed before it went to trial. So I'll find out what the cost is or was, but that's what we have for 20 individuals that were criminally charged. So, and again, that's a valid question to get that information. I think it's valid.
And then because of the short on time, we can submit all those questions that we have kind of just to your email, I think either to Wendy or to your direct email.
Sure, absolutely.
And I did want to just make a point about that, the enforcement. because there isn't anything in the bill about enforcement. And as I said in my opening statement, that's likely because people comply because of these penalties imposed where they can't apply for financial aid. And our perspective is that there's nothing, you know, there shouldn't be a connection there, that was just kind of done because people weren't registering. And people probably, if it's expanded to women, it's very likely that a lot of people will not register. And that also is sort of creates a poverty draft as well. If you can't apply for college financial aid because you, in good conscience, don't feel you can register, you know, you may already feel that you're a conscientious objector. And so, or you may not understand about registering. It's just yet another obstacle. And so I really think it should be seriously considered to remove these lifelong penalties, to remove these penalties of not being able to apply for college financial aid, of not being able to do government jobs. In California, you can get a driver's license, but in 35 states, you can't. And when Jerry Brown vetoed the driver's license law, because it did pass here, he said, the DMV has enough to do. What do they have to do with the selective service? And so I just really think it's important to look very clearly at this law and whether it's practical and whether it's just. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So please feel free to gather those questions and send them to my email. I want to make sure I keep Congressman Carbajal on time. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Wendy. Let me just conclude by saying that I registered with the Selective Service when I was a young man. My son, who's going to be 20 this month, has registered with the Selective Reserve. I understand the concerns and trepidation. But again, if you believe in having the ability for an emergency crisis, again, if anybody is, hopefully we never have to go to a draft, but if there is a draft, there's always the ability to put forth a conscientious objector petition. So that will exist at that point in time when that occurs. But at this point, again, while it could be, as Kate, you said, a precursor, as you said, it's basically the draft. I see it as a precursor to the draft, not the draft. But I do understand how people conflate the two. With that, thank you very much. I'm sorry we lost about 10, 15 minutes early on. It would have been a more robust conversation, but we were having in this new world of Zoom, it's always a little challenging. So thank you, and I appreciate all that you guys do and the issues that you stand for.
Thank you so much, Salud Carbajal, and thank you so much, Wendy Mota, for just being here and letting us know to submit all these other questions that we have and send them all your way.
You're welcome.
Have a good evening, y'all.
Thank you to all the speakers and attendees as well. Thank you so
we
much.
will keep this running as we collect everything. Thank you to all the attendees for joining us.
I think we can turn off the Facebook.
All right. There's quite a few
All
questions.
Right. Kate, I will go ahead and make you host again.
Okay. We had, someone's asking how many attendees. People have been leaving. We had 55 register.
I saw like 38, 40.
Yeah, I can't remember. And I know there were some questions. I wanted to open it up to the other panelists too, if you wanted to respond to any of the questions. And I'm sorry I kind of jumped in there, but I'm interested to hear if any of the other panelists wanted to respond. There's a lot of things in the chat too.
Yeah, let's go over some conversations. Let's have a conversation of what's been going on in the chat. There was one that said, let me see. It says, what is the reason we don't have a movement for Department of Peace? I think that's a really good point. some other things that I personally also wanted to discuss is like, why don't we have young women be at the decision-making table of a bill that will affect them? Obviously, it's adults who are making these decisions, but unfortunately, as Ashante mentioned, because she is underage, she has no right to vote for who represents her, and so forth. I don't know if you would like to further discuss that, Ashante.
Thank you, David, for bringing up that point. But yeah, like I was just saying, I am turning 18 really soon, in like 2 months. But just like bringing out the point that I don't have a say or a right towards something that most likely will be straightly affecting me if it does fall through and women do have to register. But just also, like Carbajal was saying, that there isn't really many women representing when it comes to these types of things. It's mainly males deciding these things or passing these things. But if there's just more women representation in the future, that would be great, but time will tell.
Let's go through another one. It says, Wendy Sims talked about how school board liaison she's a school board liaison, and they're seeing an uptick in recruitment of women in the armed services.
I think she was wondering whether there was an uptick. And I mean, I know that all the branches, like the Marines had a goal of 10% women. And some other people asked about risks as well. And physically, small men and women, and Anthony, maybe you've had this experience or seen it, to be carrying a 100-pound backpack on your back and doing all this training. I mean, people do get injured in basic training. So there's a lot of risks to women, and it's not like we're sitting here and promoting, oh, the weaker sex or something, but it seems just the whole thing of it elevating women's equality, it begs the question.
Yeah, and I would just add that across the board, people that, even volunteer and go in there, we have lots of medical issues that come up where they get injured in training, they get injured on the mission, and their careers just end. Like they went in for a career and now you get sick or you get hurt and now they're out of a job. So it's not like they're cared for really, when they get in there. And yeah, there's a lot of harsh requirements for some of the jobs, and not everyone can perform to some of the levels that are kind of requested. And when you get pushed to do that, you get injured. So I think there's a whole huge, I think, issue just on the healthcare alone of the military and our Veterans Affairs Department and all the disabilities that come out of it. I mean, there's a huge cost to putting the wrong people, or I shouldn't even say the wrong people, but people that are just, happen to get hurt and pushed to their limits. So it's an issue for sure.
Thanks so much. We are at 7:08. Are we gonna push this forward a bit more, or Kate?
I'm just checking. So someone in Q&A asked if recruiters, if they come to schools, which they do, if other organizations are giving equal time and representation. In Santa Barbara, we have a policy that treats everybody the same. Our school board policy. In Santa Maria, there isn't that at this point, and Truth in Recruitment has actually faced a lot of obstacles and challenges in Santa Maria. We're hoping the conversation is opening up a little more. They have a new superintendent, but they have seen us as, you want to take away students' options, that kind of thing. But in Santa Maria, the recruiters there's no policy at all. They come, over 80 times is what we've seen reported at Pioneer Valley and Santa Maria High. So in Santa Barbara, recruiters are limited to two visits a year, and Truth in Recruitment is considered a organization providing alternative information, and that's part of the policy that's in Santa Barbara. So it's good. It does, you know, college recruiters have to follow the same policy because of the No Child Left Behind. But yeah, there's two different situations that each school district can set their own policies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why it's very important for you all to, you know, attend those school board meetings and, you know, push for these policies. That's what's civic engagement is so important about, making sure that your voices are heard. All right. Do we want to end it on this note? I know our interpreter, I really want to thank our interpreter, Lorena Pike, for joining us this evening and, you know, giving us her services, her interpretation. Oh, we can't hear you. I think you're still in Spanish, or you're just saying hi. Oh, sorry. Also, Lorena Pike is a part of our steering committee, so huge ups to her.
Yeah, I saw. Yes, thank you, Lorena. And she also translated all our press releases and everything. And Asiel also does a lot of translation for us on the fly, especially. And I saw that Stanley from the fund asked how the community can support advocacy as far as this is concerned. And I do appreciate that ask. And David, I don't know if you want to do a plug for the steering committee, maybe after this, but this is an ongoing thing, and there is a group called the No Draft. It's a No Draft network. It's a group of activists all over the country. And right now, and Edward can maybe help me with this, but right now the legislation is on a big pause. Probably nothing's going to get done this year, but it probably will. The bill will get reintroduced next year. And when I spoke with Wendy Moda about this, because I did discuss the asks were sent to them a week ago, just FYI. And we discussed this idea of full and fair hearings that Ashante talked about, where both anti-draft witnesses could be at the hearings. And so she thought that that was actually something that he would be open to pushing for, so that there be fair and balanced hearings. So that is one thing. Yeah, so that's one idea. But you know, we can only do so much lobbying as a nonprofit. Actually, we've put a lot of energy into this. And I guess just getting the word out. I mean, I think we really want to build awareness with youth, in particular youth and families. So, you know, we may have to do some more educational forums to really make sure people know that this is going on.
Yeah, and it's really important, that educational aspect where we have those conversations, especially up here in North County, since we're in very large need of the policies. That education part is very crucial because, you know, this sort of subject isn't very much talked about in our day-to-day lives, you know, as we're pushing for all sorts of social, environmental, and economic justice policies. The subject of you know, militarism and peace is not really in the day-to-day conversations we have with one another, but it ultimately affects not just, you know, us, the adults, but the youth who ultimately have to register and be a part of that system for selective services. All right. So, you know, I'll start gathering questions. Do you think we're done for today, Kate?
I defer to the group.
Are we good, y'all? I know we scheduled to be till 7, so we're good then. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
And this is recorded. We'll be sure to share that, and the chat will also be recorded.
We'll send the questions.
Yeah, anybody can save the chat. I couldn't figure out how to save the Q&A, because because there were some questions there.
I've already copied the Q&A into another doc for everyone to review, so that can be shared with everyone as well.
Did you save the chat too?
Yes.
All right, cool. Then I guess we can end this meeting then.
Thank you. Oh, someone's saying they cannot save the chat. There's these 3 little dots that you should be able to, Sarah. It says maybe in a webinar you can't.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can other people who are attendees save the chat?
If anything, we can send that over
Yeah.
through the registrants.
That's right. We can see, yeah, that's exactly right. We'll make sure that all the people who registered get a copy of this, a link and all that. Great, perfect.
Hope that answers everyone's questions. All right. Well, without further ado, thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you have a good evening. Bye,
Good
everyone.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Love y'all.